Hey, Inebri-ites, before we jump into today's podcast, I just want to thank today's sponsor. Airship Notebooks has been a long-time supporter of both the Inebri-art podcast and our figure drawing event located in downtown Plymouth. So we want to say thank you to Airship Notebooks. They supply sketchbooks for the attendees to our events and some of their fine liners. They're amazing, so we get to use their product, and we all love it. And, you know, even when they're not our sponsor, we seek out their sketchbooks. And Airship seeks to provide creative tools to artists, writers, and other creative-minded individuals to help inspire them to be more creative and productive. If you need to be more creative and productive, run over to airship.store and check out what they have to offer. They have a selection of sketchbooks, notebooks, and fine liners. You can find everything you need to get your creative juices flowing there. And again, thank you to Airship Notebooks for continuing to support Inebri-art in both online and in real world. And let's get into that podcast.
Across the line, the Gulf Stream, I've been in Tampa Bay, around the Horn, and home again, 'cause that is the sailor's way.
Oh, it's okay when Hannah's chewing one. It's fine.
I go way.
Hannah's everyone's favorite.
We're recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Old Colony Cast, a podcast about all things Plymouth and surrounding areas. I am your host, Andy, and I am joined by everyone's favorite, Hanna.
Hello.
And our Padawan producer, Fish.
Nice.
Yeah. Just a little
Not growing the braid.
off podcast Star Wars chat we just had.
Yep. You gotta get caught up on all the lots of sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah, lots going on
right now
that don't involve Ewoks, surprisingly.
No. And Donnie was saying, he was like, I keep getting the Game of Thrones show mixed up with the Lord of the Rings show because they're out simultaneously.
Same time, and a lot of blonde people. Wait, you're like, which blonde person am I looking at right now?
Yeah.
But that's not what we're here to talk about.
No.
What are we talking about today, Hannah?
Well, kind of a good lead-in.
Of course, I'm a professional.
Nice segue. We're going to be talking about H.P. Lovecraft.
Ah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember discussing that at one point. But an author of fantasy and creepy stuff.
And, really creepy stuff.
Not a great guy.
No. Also, like, there's so much to be said about him. I watched a documentary that had some, like, just notable people within that realm of either storytelling or whether it's writing or movie making, like Guillermo del Toro was on it. Just talking about him. And then...
What was the
I think it's
documentary on? Was it like on...
Amazon.
Amazon? Okay.
And it's just like H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah. I just figured because that'd be cool to watch.
Yeah, it's cool. There's a lot about him. And then there's a lot about him online. So this is like... we know.
This is a broad brush kind of thing?
This is Cliff Notes, usually. Yeah. This one is definitely because there's so much about him. So whether it's like certain times in his life, like inspiring different works and like things like that, there's just definitely a lot to be said. If you want to deep dive into this guy, you definitely can.
And I think there's at least a one-part, if not a two-part episode of Stuff You Missed in History class about H.P. Lovecraft that I found really good. Yeah.
Cool. Yep. Very nice. So he was born Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Okay. And I, not knowing like too much about him personally, would have probably bet $20 that it was a pen name. H.P.
I see. Yeah.
Just because it's such
like Lovecraft was his actual name. I never thought about that.
And it's a lineage that they are able to like trace back pretty far, like into England and stuff like that. So the Lovecraft name is a real deal thing, and definitely his real name too. So I was like, wow, okay.
I wonder if there are any Lovecraft still around.
I don't know any. Yeah. I've never heard of it.
Well, that solves it.
I've never heard of it outside of him.
Yeah.
So is a U.S. writer.
Kyle Lovecraft. And this is my brother Tanner Lovecraft.
And he's a writer from Providence, Rhode Island. He was born August 20th, 1890. So he's born to his father, Winfield Scott Lovecraft, and his mom, Sarah Susan Phillips. His mom comes from like a pretty wealthy family. I don't think his dad was too bad either, but his father was institutionalized when Lovecraft was 3 and they lived in Chicago at the time. And he died shortly after, so he was institutionalized because he has like certain psychosis things going on.
At that time, if you weren't 100% normal, they're like, you're crazy.
Well, he was seeing things and
so he was legit.
He was suffering from syphilis.
Okay, that'll do it.
Yes, untreated syphilis. So he did actually like mentally deteriorate.
Yeah.
And that's what he ended up dying of. So from there, it just left him with his mom. So they moved back to Providence when he was very young. And she ended up living with her dad, so his grandfather, and mom and sister, and her sister, so his aunts. And like I said, her family was pretty wealthy because his grandfather was a businessman. Kind of reminded me of Mr. Borden, like just had his hands in a lot of different things. Mr. Borden, Lizzie Borden's dad, for anyone who doesn't know. Investments, properties, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Business.
Business. He's a business guy. And
You know, when you say he's a business guy, it usually means he's a mobster. Just the delivery guy. He's a business guy. It's like,
I don't know if he was. He had
I'm not
some
saying he
pretty,
was. I am not implying that H.P. Lovecraft's dad was in the mob.
His grandfather.
I'm just saying you're a saint. Or him.
I didn't get that impression.
Her delivery made that feel very mobby
He's into
to me.
business.
Yeah.
Don't question the business. Get out of his business. All right.
I buy and sell things.
Yeah. So they lived at 454 Angel Street in Providence, and let's see.
I feel like if you made up a character with the last name Lovecraft and had them live on Angel Street, I'd be like, that's a little corny.
I know, right? His grandfather's name was Whipple.
Whipple?
Whipple Phillips. Nice, right?
That's a fun name to say when you're
Whipple
drunk.
Phillips?
Yeah. I feel like it
Or get like a toddler that's just starting to speak.
yeah, a lot of like speech therapy things just now. So, and was there anything else in there? Susie, his mom, was very attentive, helicoptery, you could say, right? But not in a loving kind of way, in a very protective way.
And not a time when they had helicopters.
No.
More been like hot air balloon mom.
And she showed like not a lot of affection with this attention.
Okay.
Because she was very like puritanistic, so it wasn't like a lovey-dovey, hovery mom. It was just keeping an eye on things, very strict.
Yeah.
Your mother is watching you. Your mother is always watching you.
Yeah. His grandfather is the one who helped inspire his love for stories and like the fantastical world of, your imagination. He encouraged him to read and appreciate literature and introduced him to like all the weird stories and winged horrors that existed in books and things like that. And he had a really big collection in his attic, so that's like where his library was and where we'd go to read. He also wanted him to just be like aware of other literature, so he got him really into poetry and the classic writings of 17th century, 18th century. I always say them wrong.
18th.
18th, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, it was definitely 18th. So the treatment from his mom made him very reclusive and also like not the most social guy.
Yeah.
He was awkward. Like he spent most of his time like reading, and then if he didn't like the things that he liked, he wasn't going to go much out of his way to like get to know you. And this is him just as like a kid.
Yeah.
Some of his bigger influences besides storytelling was like his love of astrology. So he got into astrology at a young age and learned a lot about that. That's kind of like inspired his stories around the monsters from the cosmos and things like that.
Yeah.
Lots of alien stuff, right? And Edgar Allan Poe. So
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
that's in line, yeah. That adds up. In the 1900s, Whipple had financial misfortune. In 1908, they lost their home, and his grandfather died that same year, shortly after, which was like a big hit to him because he like...
It sounds like he was connected with it.
Yeah, definitely. that same year, he ended up leaving school, but he'd be in and out of school the whole time he was supposed to be in school.
Was it because he was sick?
Yeah.
Okay.
With what they didn't know, they kind of added it up to be general nervousness, weakness, headaches, things that could just be aligned with severe anxiety.
Sure.
But they really didn't know at the time, and that went on until he was in high school. He does describe that time after his grandfather died and they had to move because they couldn't keep the finances going to keep their house.
Yeah.
As some of the darkest times of his life. And he's like not even out of high school yet.
Right.
So just was like, yeah. Well, that adds up too.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's also one of those like that's prime breeding ground for like creative people.
That is prime emo breeding ground.
Yeah,
right.
You know, like it's a tragic life, and you're a teenager, and
which means everything is the worst, no matter how good or bad it is. It's the most that it's ever happened to you because you have no reference for anything.
And now this is where it kind of flows into him. So he's in high school. He doesn't actually make it through high school. He ends up leaving before he graduates. Mm-hmm. In 1919, The Vagrant, which was like a little publishing newsletter thing, published one of his stories. I think it was Dagon, which was made later into a movie that was actually just took the name, but was actually another story
completely
of his.
Different,
yeah. And he created many more to come that would go out into like smaller publishing companies, but he didn't actually I knew this about him, but I didn't realize how severe it was that his like recognition and the stories that are really popular today just weren't popular when he was alive.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So 1913, 1914, which I know is kind of going back a little bit because everything was slightly out of order as they were telling these stories. So that's what I got. He got into amateur journalism, so it took from the time he got into it to like 1919 to get a story actually published somewhere.
Okay.
But again, he was still pretty young.
Yeah.
So, so he started as early as 1912. This is where we get into his problematic.
Yep. His
views.
problematic beliefs. Yeah.
So yeah, he was xenophobic, racist, all the things combined into that. And he started to publish a letter called The Conservative, which gained attention for people who agreed and disagreed, but people who enjoyed writing all the same. And he actually like got a lot of people to correspond with from that, and that's how he made like a lot of his friends was other people that enjoyed writing.
Okay.
To write to, and like people that
did they have the same kind of belief structure?
Some of them did, and some of them didn't. So he like kept some conversations going with people who disagreed too.
Okay.
But yeah, he really didn't like immigrants, and this is around a time in America where
there was a lot of them.
There was a lot of immigration happening in the U.S. There's definitely like stuff put out from him that just talks about this in the way that is like the right way, very almost Aryan in a way. Like he didn't want. In some ways, it was described not so much about race, but culture just shouldn't mix. Like the white culture needed to be preserved, and you know, people coming in from other countries didn't need to mix their culture with his. Yeah. So that was his general gist. To get deeper into it, we don't really need to. Yeah. But that just know, like in all of his stories and all this was going on in the background of his head. He was definitely not great.
So I've never read any H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay, yeah.
Was it prevalent in his writings? Like,
no, I wouldn't say prevalent. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was. The more popular stories that I think people know today,
not so much.
Probably not as noticeable.
Okay.
But no, he has some that I can't even say the names of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm like, yes, no, yes. Actually, yes.
Now that I run through the list of stories.
Like there were some I was like, oh my God. Like, no. It was
can't use the name of that one.
Yeah.
That one or that
some
one
of them were very blatant. But I think when you think about the ones that translated into movies today, probably not as much, but still there's always, you gotta imagine there's that undertone, like, probably all white people.
Yeah.
You know, there's not going to be like adding anyone for perception of anything.
Yeah.
To go to a grander audience. It was meant to be read by white people. That was his culture. So that's him in a nutshell. He was, like I said, able to connect with other people through his correspondence, and that's actually how he started sending his stories out, like, to get the vibe. So he started writing his stories and just sending them to his friends that he'd already been writing with. And that's how, like, he's got hundreds and hundreds of stories written out just in that way.
Just sending them to friends.
And not even, like, ever being published. So, and a side note of his beliefs, he was also an atheist. He was raised, like I said, his mom was, like, very puritanical in that way. And I think from, like, a Protestant background, but he was not religious growing up, or once he kind of left that, got a little bit older. Around the time, like, kids started questioning it was pretty much when he did too. Let's see, he first got his paid writing jobs as a ghostwriter, and he was publishing at a very, like, amateur level. Let's see, 1919, his mom was committed with similar symptoms that her husband had.
Okay.
Said she was, like, seeing things. And in 1921, it looked like she passed away due to complications from a surgery. So, let's see. In 1920, he began, not that it wasn't already created, but that the whole, like, Cthulhu mythos was kind of created and started being, like, published into his stories that people could actually read.
Yeah.
Which is
easily what he's most famous for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hugely famous for. And if you don't, there's got to be so much out there that you don't even realize is adapted or taken, because he made a whole genre in mythos that, like, to the point where I thought some of these things were based off real stuff that people believed from a long time ago. Does that make sense?
Oh, so you're thinking it's real. How people think that Slender Man's real, even though you can point to a guy and go, no, that guy there, he made up Slender Man.
Or in the light where I thought it was, because it's like the old ones, the old ones.
So you assume there was some kind of, like, you thought he was getting it from somewhere.
Yes, literally.
You thought he was cribbing from something else as opposed to just pulling it wholly out of his imagination.
You're right. Correct. You got it. So, like, the idea that it is a mythos and it's grown into something, I don't know.
Not real, but...
Yeah. But you, like...
feels real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it inspired so many other things.
Yeah.
So, he wrote Herbert West, The Reanimator, and that was a series that was published and something that paid a little bit of money, and it was described as a horror comedy. And you guys have seen The Reanimator?
I have not, but I'm very familiar with it.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I've never hung out with someone and been like, hey, let's watch Reanimator. Yeah. But, like, I'm very familiar with it because I'm a nerd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a popular one. Certainly the movie is today. And I don't want to say that was, like, his first paying one, but it definitely was something that helped bring in a little bit of money, which he never brought in a lot of money for his writing.
Okay.
Did
he hold down another job, or?
He was just, like, a reclusive person.
Yeah.
And I think, like, the people around him, the people around him supported him.
Yeah.
Financially. So, like, his aunts, he lived with after, like, his mom was institutionalized. But at this point, he's, like, a young adult.
Yeah.
And not moving out of the basement anytime soon, as far as he can tell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, he did travel a little bit for work and met up for writing and would meet up with, like, people that he knew from corresponding with over the years, and he ended up going to New York, and he actually hated traveling because he hated running into immigrants.
Yeah, I was going to say because he's going to run into people.
Yes.
Just run into people that aren't him.
Exactly. Yeah. So it made him uncomfortable, How unfortunate for him. Jesus. And he actually ended up meeting his wife while he was traveling in New York. And he met his wife in 1921. Her name was Sonia Haft-Green, and she was Jewish.
Weird.
Yep. And he was openly anti-Semitic.
Okay. That's some...
Tale as old as time.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right.
His aunts disapproved. Not sure if his values of immigrants came from them. Yeah. Came from anyone.
That kind of like Protestant, they probably didn't like...
Just the change, like religion.
Yeah, they probably didn't like cross-faith marriages.
Yeah. So he would end up moving to Brooklyn and married Sonia in 1924. Now, he still had a lot of trouble getting, like, his stories published and getting actually paid for work. So he ended up submitting 5 stories to Weird Tales, which was a magazine that was for that. And they accepted all of the 5 and ended up publishing them. That was a little bit for him, but not a ton. And they didn't have an easy time. Sonia had some financial issues. She, I guess, owned like a hat shop at the time that had to close, and then she had to get a different job, which made her travel a lot too. So she was paying for her husband, H.P. Lovecraft, to live in their apartment
while she traveled
and do what writing he could. And yeah, I guess he ended up like losing about like 40 pounds while he was just there in waiting. A man in waiting or something. Wow. Yeah, because he like couldn't take care of himself, it sounds like. And she still supported him like for a very long time. And then I think at one point, like many in that situation, what it just became like it didn't make sense. He wanted to move back home. He moved back home with his aunts, and they were like in a separation.
Okay.
And that was in 1926. But after some time, they did end up agreeing on a divorce, and Sonia would get remarried, but like he didn't change anything at all. He just like moved back home and then was like, sweet, now I'm back with my aunts.
Yeah.
I'm good to go.
Back where he's comfortable.
Yeah, and he was happy to be back in Providence because it just was like his comfort place.
Yeah.
And after moving back in with his aunts, he ended up writing most of his like most popular works that a lot of people would know today, Call of Cthulhu being one of them. So, let's see. Okay, we're kind of nearing on the end of him, but spoiler alert, 1936, he actually got published like a full story, which until then had just been small magazine things and short stories, things like that. Shadow Over, I wrote Evan, Shadow over Innsmouth, published in 400 copies, sold 200, and he hated how they came out. I guess there were a lot of mistakes in editing.
Oh, really?
So the publisher ended up destroying the other 200 copies, so he didn't end up making really money off that.
Yeah.
And then that was like really like the foreshadowing to the end of his career, which when you think about it, like I feel like didn't even get started.
Yeah, it's weird that like he's so popular today without like.
No, yeah, that's basically his whole. I was gonna say his whole career is posthumous. That's weird and wrong. But his whole like popularity all came out way after the fact, so it's not like he was just a dude,
right?
Yeah, but you know it's like I don't know. I mean, it's published, but it's just. Seems like it'd be hard to find like all the things that he's written,
right?
If he, you know,
because there's so much out there he never, turned into anyone.
Ghost writing, and, you know.
So, his illness, I'm sure one that started long before he came back to Providence. From the sound of it, honestly, because he was just not well.
Yeah.
He was sick all the time. He was sick from high school, probably for other things, but this was a little more serious. He had cancer of the small intestine.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't like going to the doctor, so it took him a long time to get to the doctor.
Yeah.
To actually like find out what was wrong. And he ended up dying on March 15th, 1937. And he's buried in Providence. and it's on his gravestone. It says, like, you know, his name and whatever, and I Am Providence was carved on it, but not because he requested it. I think it was, like, put together by a fandom of some kind.
That's a weird thing to put
on. And his works inspired so much. Like, we could go on and talk about, like, all the things. He created, like, his universe, right?
Yeah.
Similar to Stephen King, there's themes and places that are the same. His is the same idea. There's towns that are, Arkham is one of them. There's the college. Do you know what the college is?
No.
Shoot.
I know. I forget what it's called. Donnie has a bumper sticker on his car that says he Mesotonic College.
Okay.
Is the name of it. It's all very New England based. A lot of it takes place between Rhode Island and Maine.
Yeah.
And I mentioned, like, aliens and stuff earlier, but for people who don't know who Cthulhu is, it's like a huge ocean god monster.
Like an octopus face.
Squid god, yeah.
Squid god. And there's so many other little gods and creatures that...
But Cthulhu is the most famous.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one that you could easily not even realize H.P. Lovecraft created.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
like,
it's also one of those things that if you've never heard of Cthulhu, when you find out who and what Cthulhu is, you suddenly see it
everywhere. Yeah. Hugely influential on movies to this day. Like The Thing was inspired by a Lovecraft story.
Was it Cabin in the Woods?
No.
It's very kind of...
It was kind of like... Yeah, I'd say, yeah.
You could be. And there's so many that you say, like, could be, but aren't a direct inspiration, but definitely pull from.
Well, Cabin in the Woods they were having, like, these basically ritual sacrifices to keep, like, these elder gods asleep.
I forgot that was the whole point of it.
That's the whole point of the movie. Yeah.
Oh my god!
And it's so I love that movie.
Yeah,
it's a really good movie.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally forgot that was like the twist at the end wasn't even that they were moving all the pieces and making all this weird stuff happen. That was the whole reason for it. So true.
Sorry, spoiler alert for Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah. I know, and then they still make movie versions of his
comics,
stories.
And we had a comic book creator on, probably like 200 episodes ago on Inebri-art, and she had done an Ismith, comic book, and
there's a whole obviously Providence.
His writing is obviously 100 years old, so it's public domain,
right? And Providence has like a monument for this guy. Like, he's on a pedestal down there. But he...
they also have a convention every year, too.
Yeah. The Necronomicon.
Yes,
I've gone to it before.
I'm like, it's not Cthulhu.
No, the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
Because the Necronomicon is also just a book from him. But I know I'm like just a bad reader. Like, I can read all this stuff to find out this information because it's nice, like, short, sweet stuff. But, like...
I'm a very, very slow reader, which...
Me too.
I think is part of
being
dyslexic.
I have not... Yeah, same. Yeah. I haven't committed to reading much of anything from him. But Donnie has, like, huge collection. Like, a pretty decent collection from him. And has read a lot. And I want to say, like, the most recent movie, at least, that came right from... a book of his was The Color Out of Space with Nicolas Cage. It just came out like a year or two ago.
Yeah, okay. Not familiar with that.
And that one's...
But it's got to be a masterpiece with Nicolas Cage in it.
I liked it. I did. I liked it. Except Nicolas Cage was doing pretty much a spot-on Donald Trump impression the entire time.
Okay.
And it's an interesting movie, but... I know, like, Donnie's read that book, so he was like, "They're so different."
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, I just think it's interesting. Not only is there so much work inspired by, but they're literally just like, oh, this book hasn't been made into a movie. Let's make it into a movie. And it is weird. Oh, The Lighthouse, that was considered to be inspired by...
The one with...
Robert Pattinson
and the other guy? Whose name?
Dafoe. Willem Dafoe.
Is it Willem Dafoe in it?
Yeah.
Why did I think it was someone else?
I don't know.
Are you thinking of another movie?
No, I was thinking of that one. But I thought it was... Walter White from Breaking Bad.
Yeah, it's definitely not him.
Definitely not
I don't know why I thought he was in that movie. It's
Well,
weird.
he's not.
Okay. I hear that's a very good movie.
It is. It is artsy.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the time of like H.P. Lovecraft and a Lovecraftian type of, I don't know, setup. But it not so much like huge scary monsters, but definitely like a calling to that. And I mean,
Weird
a lot of
creepy.
his stuff is ocean based because he's like off the water, so there's crab people and things like that, But big inspiration in the horror movie, fantasy, sci-fi genre still to this day.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all I got on him.
Okay. Well, I think that's the part where we stop talking.
All right, hit me with a lobster gummy.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.